So when it was time for me to move back to the States, you can be sure I was investigating air quality. So I got about a ream of documents, 500 pages at least, no joke, from the EPA with studies around the US concerning water and air quality. And I found that at that time, the 50-mile radius around a little town called Hunt, Texas, was purported to have the cleanest air in the country. There was no agriculture, there was no industry, there was no big city, and the water from the water table from the wells and the wells in the area were also supposed to be some of the cleanest in the nation. It was the center for a lot of children's camps, and it actually looked a lot like the hill country of Jamaica. We ended up moving there. But at age 10, my son Douglas was exposed to a concoction of pesticides. The doctor called it a catastrophic chemical exposure. So in one day, he went from being calm, stable, obedient, athletic, and brilliant to agitated, unpredictable, uncoordinated, and unable to spell even simple three-letter words or do simple math. We ended up, after several emergency room and doctor's visits, taking him to a specialist, the doctor that treats Gulf War syndrome veterans and other poisoning victims. And when I heard his words, "Your son will never recover. He has had so much neurological and brain damage, he will be like a bubble boy for the rest of his life because his immune system can no longer process the everyday chemicals we all come into contact with. You will have to give him medication and create a special room for him that has no immune stressors. And that will be where he lives." And then, last but not least, he dropped the cancer bomb. He said he will have cancer in 10 years. Well, I had the same response I'd had to my surgeon and my gynecologist. I respected this doctor and his work, but I was again at a medical crossroad where there was no acceptable answer, no hope of recovery. I refused to accept that verdict, and I told the doctor respectfully, "I'm just so glad you're not God because I know my son's going to recover." And I didn't mean just get better. I meant he was going to recover. Well, I was very naive, and I really didn't understand what we were up against. Looking back, the switch to diet and that change for me was really relatively very quick. I didn't have any concept of the fact that our 7-year experience seemed like being many times in a hopeless hell with a son that was a captive to his own brain and body, but that this experience would one day reveal critical, crucial, and practical keys for releasing him and others with chronic illness from their prisons. So the roadblocks and barriers many times seemed insurmountable. We took him home, and we decided that we would make our entire home a sanctuary so he was not isolated to one room. We had no idea what it really meant. It was a learning experience, to say the least. We followed the doctor's recommendations. We took out all the carpet. We had no carpet. We took out all upholstered furniture, drapes, books, papers. We were left with concrete floors, 2 organic beds. We had to get those, a solid wood table, and chairs, and metal wire bins for clothes. But he kept reacting. He was unpredictable. One minute he would be bouncing off the walls as if he were on some sort of crack drug, or he might be reduced to extreme lethargy, unable to function or lift his head off a pillow. He'd start crying, sobbing, or he'd go into deep depression. He might snap out of it and become so wired that he couldn't sleep. He'd fall down on the floor with blinding headaches. He'd have excruciating sensitivity to sound. And even though we had been told that he was reacting to very small amounts of chemicals, this really wasn't immediately apparent to us. It didn't become clear until we understood enough to create a safe place for him where he wasn't reacting. But this was going to take some time. So I was giving Douglas 23 shots a day and other medications. And even with all the changes we did, his condition continued to get worse. He kept having reactions in the house. I kept throwing things out, and that was easy. I threw out products, cleaning products, body care products, pens, pencils, books. It was truly minimalistic. The problem was, I think, well, I didn't know at that time, but it was what we're going to find to put back in the house. So we found that he felt much better outside. Duh. The longer he would be out, the more we would see some shift or improvement. So we decided to sleep outside as much as we could. No tent, but out in the open sky. He reacted to tents. So we made a family game of it. It really was fun. And all of a sudden he was getting better, which was very encouraging. He begged us to take him off his medications and shots because he said they weren't helping him and they made him feel worse. Well, we stopped them. And again, he had tangible improvement. I kept reading every book I could to get a hold of about pesticide poisonings, exposures to chemicals, chemical sensitivity. I studied Dr. Jeffrey Bland's work on the phases of detoxification, intestinal permeability, leaky gut, circadian rhythms, genetic deviations, etc. So many arenas of food as medicine, from raw foods, water fasting, paleo type diets, ketogenic diets. I went through the gamut, and I made call after call to people who had been chemically injured looking for anyone with experience or success. But no one ever gave me the answer I wanted. Yes, I overcame this, and your son can too. Well, this made me even more determined. The problem was that he was better, but he couldn't be in our house without reacting. So there was a network of people, and the doctor that we had seen had discovered a product that many of his patients were using that would decontaminate chemicals. So it decontaminated houses, it neutralized and broke down pesticides, petroleum products, cleaning product residues, and other contaminations. It was also being used for severe burns. It was so easy on the skin. You just put the concentrate on whatever part of the skin was burned. You'd hold the burned part in there until it stopped hurting, and there'd be no trace of the burn. And we used that many times. It was amazing. It was being used on bee stings and other bites because the negative charge of the formula would pull the positively charged poison out of the skin. It sounded like some kind of snake oil, but I was desperate. And I spoke to numerous chemically injured people that told me that it was the only product they could get near. So we ended up washing down our ceilings, walls, and floor, and everything in the house with the product that could be washed all our clothes, and it was incredible. Douglas could be in the house. And not only that, he could be in the house when that product was being used and could use it on his body with no reaction. It was a major milestone. But there was a caveat. And before I go forward with that, I want to say that we just don't pay attention to clues we are given, and we just go bounding forward. So the caveat here was that if he stayed in the house a long time, he would start noticing something bothering him, as he would say it. And he was still having problems sleeping in the house. And I could have just said, "Oh, you're okay. We fixed the problem," and just pushed him. But I had a deja vu moment when I recalled how much better he got when he was a baby, when I switched to the Feingold diet, but he still couldn't sleep because there was more to the story. And I knew there was more to this story, more that I had to discover. So I had heard about this German study of Bau-biology, meaning building biology, and that's my husband and I, both decided to study this. And we learned how the Germans linked health and recovery from any illness to the home environment. That the home environment should be a safe haven, with the bedroom being the most important room in the house. The house needed to be clear of toxins, mold, and EMFs. EMFs? What was that? There were no cell phones, no Wi-Fi, no personal computers, no iPads. Oh my gosh. There were only landlines. And at that time, though, the Germans considered the AC electric field to be the main inhibitor of recovery from serious illness. At night, the body is supposed to rest, recover, and rejuvenate from the day's events. But if the body is resting in a chemical soup plus high electromagnetic fields, then the body is not able to heal. Well, when we tested Douglas in his bed for body voltage, he had 25,000 millivolts in his body. And to put that in perspective, it takes only 1 millivolt to operate a pacemaker. The readings were outrageous. And this was due to the fact we were in a very old house. It had old knob and tube wiring, which also creates high AC magnetic fields. And so we had that all fixed. And we were introduced to the world that electromagnetic fields can affect the body. And we learned about other aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum, such as making sure our son didn't spend time next to running motors, such as the refrigerator, television, etc. And that was to reduce his exposure to AC magnetic fields. We learned to not store steel items under the bed, which we weren't. And also, for instance, don't sleep over a garage with a car in it because of DC magnetic fields. We learned that synthetic fabrics in a home create DC electric fields. So there was a whole new world opening up, and we made sure that he played even more outside in the sunshine and fresh air and grounded as much as possible. I also started studying building materials and later building science, which is the study of how materials are put together to build a home so that they don't promote mold growth, indoor air quality issues, and other problems. So we realized we had found a critical piece of the puzzle, as there was a turn for the better in his condition after these changes were made. But I have to say, although he was so much better, he still was having some trouble staying in the house for long periods of time, and his sleep still just wasn't right. So, and we're almost finished here. One night, as I was laying on the cot looking at the stars, trying to figure out what the heck we were missing, he was sleeping great outside. He was feeling good, but something inside was disturbing him, especially his sleep. I kept thinking about the Bau-biology quote that I learned, and that's this: at night, the body is supposed to rest, recover, and rejuvenate from the day's events. But if the body is resting in high electromagnetic fields or a chemical soup or mold or some contamination, then the body is not able to heal. Well, I started going through a checklist. We'd fixed the EMF issues. I'd stripped the house. We had decontaminated the house with the new formula. What had I forgotten? And in a flash, looking up at those stars, I remembered that although I had removed all the cleaning and personal care products from the house, I had decided to keep my favorite ones in one box in a closet. My favorite perfumes, even my one from high school, Chantilly, I'll never forget that, skincare, cleaning products. And I just didn't see how that would matter. After all, they were closed up in a box, and I thought I'd get them out when he was better. Well, I thought I was insane to even be thinking what I was thinking, but regardless, I got up in the middle of the night and I took that box out